Have you ever met someone who seemed wise without needing to say much? Welcome to Stoic Glow, and trust me, you'll be glad you showed up today. What we're about to explore could shift the way you see yourself, and how others see you too. Let me ask you something. When you think of truly intelligent men, what comes to mind? A brain packed with facts? Someone who can win every argument? What if I told you their real power lies in what they don't say? Yes. That's right. Their strength isn't in having all the answers, or knowing every capital city by heart. It's in restraint. It's in the silence they choose. Because sometimes, the things we don't say speak louder than any clever quote ever could. Over the years, I've studied human behavior through the lens of ancient Stoic philosophy and, I'll be honest, through countless cups of coffee while people watching in the real world. And I've noticed a pattern. The wisest men I've observed all share something rare. They don't waste their breath. They don't speak to fill silence. And most importantly, they never say things that chip away at their integrity. So today, we're diving into 7 things intelligent men never say. Not because they're flawless, but because experience, often the hard kind, has taught them that some phrases do more harm than good. If you want to think sharper, speak wiser, and grow into the kind of person others naturally respect, stick around, tap that subscribe button, and let's get a little wiser together. Number 1. I already know that. It's a phrase that rolls off the tongue more often than we'd like to admit. I already know that. It sounds confident, even impressive. But what it really reveals is far less flattering. A closed mind, you see. A truly intelligent man understands something vital. The moment you believe there's nothing left to learn, you've just slammed the door shut on growth. I learned this lesson the hard way. Years ago, I was working under a mentor. The kind of man who didn't need to prove anything. He had that quiet strength that only comes from real-life battles. We were reviewing a task I'd done 100 times before. He started explaining a detail, and without thinking, I cut in. Yeah, I already know that. He looked at me, not angry, just calm. But that glance stayed with me. Later that night, it hit me. I hadn't just interrupted him. I had shut myself off from learning, from seeing what he saw, the details I'd missed, the wisdom that doesn't come from training manuals or video tutorials, but from years of real experience. When we say, I already know that, what we're really saying is, I've stopped learning. And that's not intelligence. That's arrogance, disguised as competence. Stoic wisdom calls this out for what it is. Marcus Aurelius, one of the greatest Stoic minds, warned us clearly. You cannot learn anything when you think you already know everything. What he meant was this. The ego, that loud, subtle force always trying to protect our image, becomes the wall between us and our growth. It convinces us we're standing on solid ground, when in truth, we're teetering on pride. Intelligent men know this. They understand that knowledge isn't a trophy you win and place on a shelf. It's a river, always flowing, always shifting. You step into the same spot twice, and the water is never the same. I once watched a master carpenter, probably in his 60s, listening intently to a young apprentice explaining a technique. He nodded, asked questions, even thanked the kid for sharing. Later, I asked him why he didn't just tell him he already knew all that. He smiled and said, because sometimes, you learn more by hearing how someone else sees it. That's not just humility. That's wisdom, the kind that comes from intelligence that's been refined by time. And that brings us to the second thing wise men never say, and trust me, this one might surprise you. Let's keep going. As we touched on earlier, true intelligence isn't about always having the answer. It's about having the humility to listen, even when you think you've heard it all before. So the next time you catch yourself thinking, I already know this, pause, take a breath, listen anyway, not to humor the other person, but because you might just catch something new, a small detail, a shift in perspective, or a subtle nuance that deepens your understanding. And even if you don't, you're still practicing something far more powerful: humility. You're showing respect, and over time, that makes you the kind of person others want to listen to. In Stoic philosophy, this is what we call mastery of the self. It's the ability to set your ego aside in pursuit of clarity, the strength to remain a student of life. Always, because in the end, that's the kind of intelligence that endures, not the loudest in the room, but the most grounded, the one who grows deeper, not just louder too. That's impossible. I remember years ago working with a man named Robert. He was sharp, experienced, the kind of leader who carried the weight of the company on his shoulders without ever looking strained. But there was one phrase he used often, almost instinctively: that's impossible. Anytime a new idea was introduced, whether it was entering a new market, streamlining an outdated process, or even reaching out to a difficult client, he'd shut it down with just those two words: that's impossible. At first, it sounded responsible, even wise. After all, who has time to chase unrealistic dreams? But over time, something became painfully clear. Every time he said, "that's impossible," he wasn't talking about the situation, he was talking about himself. His own limits, his own fear. The Stoics understood this kind of thinking well. Seneca once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." That's exactly what Robert was doing. He wasn't analyzing problems objectively. He was projecting his fear onto them. Fear of the unknown. Fear of being wrong. Fear of trying and failing. And it wasn't obvious fear. It was quiet. It wore the mask of logic. It sounded like caution. It looked like practicality, but beneath it was the very thing that keeps us small. The belief that if we can't see the whole path, we shouldn't take the first step. Stoic philosophy slices through this kind of paralysis. It reminds us that the obstacle isn't the issue, it's our perception of the obstacle that defeats us. I saw this truth unfold firsthand. Years after working with Robert, I joined a new project. The budget was tight, the timeline ridiculously short, and the team mostly inexperienced. Everything in me said, "This can't be done." But instead of saying, "that's impossible," I asked myself, "what can I control today? What's the next small step I can take?" That project turned out to be one of the most successful I've ever been part of, not because we performed miracles, but because we refused to be paralyzed by the size of the challenge. We stayed focused, one step, then the next. Marcus Aurelius once said, "You have power over your mind, not outside events." And that made all the difference. When a man says, "that's impossible," he's often declaring defeat before the battle even begins. Intelligent men know this. What feels impossible is usually just unfamiliar. It's not a wall, it's a call to move forward. Because strength isn't built by winning every battle. It's built by showing up, again and again, especially when the odds aren't in your favor. Have you ever told yourself, "I can't do that"? Then you'll want to stick around, because the third phrase is one you've likely said without realizing how much it's holding you back. Previously, we explored how refusing to say, "that's impossible," opens doors others don't even see. Sometimes, it only takes the courage to take one small step forward, and that alone can set you apart in a world where most remain stuck. And that, right there, is the essence of Stoic courage. Not reckless optimism, but disciplined persistence. Life constantly challenges us with difficult tasks. And the moment we label something impossible, we quietly shut the door on ourselves. But the man who keeps moving, even if it's just one small step at a time, opens doors no one else even notices. That's not just intelligence, that's wisdom. Wisdom forged through effort and persistence. Part 3. That's not my fault. One of the most damaging things a man can say is, "That's not my fault." It sounds harmless, even reasonable, especially in the moment. When things go wrong, whether at work, in a relationship, or in life, it's natural to want to protect ourselves. We want to make it clear that the blame lies elsewhere. But here's the truth. Every time we push away responsibility, we give away our power along with it. Wise men understand this deeply. They know that responsibility isn't about accepting blame, it's about choosing to have influence. Because if you refuse to own even a small piece of the problem, you also give up your chance to be part of the solution. I saw this firsthand years ago. A friend of mine, Michael, lost a major client. Right away, he explained why it wasn't his fault. The client was too demanding. The market was shifting. His team missed key deadlines. All of those reasons were partially true. But while he focused on why he wasn't to blame, he missed something critical: the chance to learn from it, to grow, to change. Instead, he stayed stuck, repeating the same mistakes, convinced that it was always someone else's mess to clean up. What he didn't realize was that by refusing to take any responsibility, he gave up the one thing that could have changed his outcome: control over himself. The Stoics taught us to focus on what's within our control and to let go of the rest. As Epictetus put it, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. That's the key. When we say, "That's not my fault," we hand the power to change the situation over to someone else. We wait for them to fix it, for them to do better, for something to change externally. But when we're willing to accept even a sliver of responsibility, we immediately reclaim that power. We stop being passive, we become active, we move from helpless to powerful. In my own life, I've learned that owning my part, no matter how small, reveals opportunities I never saw before. It might be as simple as saying, "I didn't communicate clearly," or "I should have prepared better." Even if others made bigger mistakes, the act of stepping up changes everything. That willingness to take responsibility builds something inside you. It builds trust with yourself and with the people around you. It shows the world that you're not a man who waits to be rescued or vindicated. You act. Blame is easy. Responsibility is hard. But it's also where real strength lives. The Stoics remind us, we're not here to run from hardship. We're here to rise above it. And rising begins with one simple question: what can I do differently next time? That's how intelligent men lead. Not by finding fault, but by finding a way forward. In the previous part, we learned that denying responsibility doesn't make us stronger, it only strips away our power to change. But there's something even more dangerous: believing we have to carry everything alone. Society often glorifies the image of the lone wolf, the self-made man who walks his own path, bearing his burdens without complaint. It sounds admirable, even noble, but the truth behind it is far less heroic. Refusing to ask for help is rarely a sign of strength. More often, it's a sign of pride, quiet, corrosive, and blinding. It isolates us. It convinces us that suffering in silence is a virtue. But over time, it slowly erodes the very resilience we think we're preserving. This truth hit me again when I read about Abraham Lincoln during the darkest days of the American Civil War. History paints him as a solitary figure, stoic, burdened, carrying the weight of a fractured nation on his shoulders. But what's often overlooked is how deeply Lincoln leaned on others. He surrounded himself with advisors who didn't just agree with him, they challenged him. He actively sought out opposing viewpoints, not because he lacked confidence, but because he understood a vital truth: wisdom doesn't grow in isolation, it's shaped by the courage to admit you don't know everything. During the brutal Battle of Antietam, Lincoln famously met with General McClellan despite their many differences, because he needed strategic insight. He spent countless hours with his cabinet, famously called the team of rivals, because he valued their input, even when it clashed with his own. This wasn't weakness, it was strength, measured by humility. That's a lesson intelligent men eventually learn. Self-reliance is important, but it was never meant to be absolute. Even Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, didn't pretend to know everything in his meditations. He openly credited his mentors, his teachers, and his friends for shaping his thinking. He listed what he had learned from each of them, acknowledging their wisdom and how it helped shape his own. If the most powerful emperor in the world could admit he didn't have all the answers, why can't we? Yet many of us still resist. We tell ourselves that asking for help means we've failed, that reaching out is a sign of weakness. But that belief is a trap. It locks us inside our own minds, drowning slowly in problems we were never meant to face alone. Even worse, it robs the people around us of their chance to give, because when we don't ask, we also deny others the opportunity to support us. We cut off the very connection that binds us to one another. I've fallen into that trap myself. There was a time when I thought I had to hold it all together: work, family, the constant pressure of living up to an image of strength. I believed that keeping it together meant keeping it all to myself. But all it did was wear me down. The turning point came when I finally admitted to someone I trusted that I couldn't do it alone. What I received wasn't judgment, it was empathy. It was support, and in that small moment of humility, I found the clarity and energy I'd been missing for years. I realized that true strength isn't about how long you can stand alone, it's about knowing when to reach out, and when to accept a helping hand. The Stoics teach that we are part of something larger. We are made for cooperation, for mutual aid. Epictetus reminds us, no man is an island. And when we pretend otherwise, we're fighting against the natural order of life itself. Strength is not diminished by asking for help. In fact, it is defined by it. Because asking for help takes courage. It takes honesty. And those are the marks of real strength. The previous page reminded us of one profound truth. True strength isn't about carrying every burden alone. It's about knowing when to open up, and when to take the helping hand offered. A wise man understands this. Carrying everything by yourself isn't noble, it's unnecessary. So the next time you feel the urge to say, "I've got this, I don't need help," pause for just a moment. Ask yourself, is that strength speaking? Or is it pride wearing a clever disguise? And remember Lincoln, the leader who ruled with both wisdom and humility. He knew something most forget. Even the strongest among us need others to stand tall. Part 5. I'm too old for that. A quiet lie that steals our future. One of the most damaging lies a man can ever tell himself is, "I'm too old for that." It doesn't always come out with weight or sorrow. Sometimes, it slips through in a casual joke, or in what seems like harmless self-deprecation. But beneath that simple phrase lies something far heavier: resignation. A belief that the best chapters have already been written, and there's nothing left worth chasing. That kind of thinking quietly shuts the doors of life, long before time ever does. Intelligent men know this truth. That phrase isn't just limiting, it's toxic. It begins as a whisper but becomes a slow erosion of purpose, a quiet surrender to a life that still has so much more to give. I once read the story of a man named Harry Bernstein. At the age of 93, after a life spent working as a magazine editor and raising a family, he decided to write his first book. He called it The Invisible Wall, a memoir of his childhood in a poor English town. Divided by religion and prejudice, publishers rejected it again and again. But eventually, it was published. Harry was 96 when it hit the shelves. That book would go on to receive international acclaim. It was translated into multiple languages and touched the hearts of readers all over the world. Harry went on to write 3 more books after that. What struck me most about his story wasn't the success, it was the courage. The courage to believe that life still had something waiting for him, the courage to keep growing, learning, and contributing, even in his 90s. And that kind of courage? It's not exclusive to people like Harry. It's a choice each of us can make, sometimes every single day. We can choose to listen to the voice that says, "Your time has passed," or we can choose to believe this instead: as long as you're still breathing, you still have purpose. The Stoics taught that age means nothing to the soul. Marcus Aurelius reflected often on this truth, reminding himself that death is inevitable. Yes, but until it comes, Our duty is to live as fully and virtuously as we can. He believed wisdom often comes with age. Not because of the years themselves, but because those who stay curious, who keep showing up bravely, grow deeper with time. I've seen men in their 60s learn new trades, start businesses, mentor younger leaders, and I've seen others shrink under the weight of regret and time, retreating from life. The difference isn't in their circumstances, but in their mindset. The man who says, "I'm too old for that," has already closed the door, but the man who asks, "What can I do now?" opens it wide again. Age does not disqualify us from living boldly. If anything, it gives us more to offer. Experience, clarity, resilience. These are not signs of someone who's finished. They are the tools of someone just getting started. And that is the Stoic path. To keep learning, to keep striving, right up to the final breath. Because as long as we're still here, there is still work to be done. If there's a phrase both deceptively comforting and deeply destructive, it is this: "I'll do it later." It sounds reasonable, even responsible, like a small promise to ourselves that we'll get to it, eventually. But here's the truth. Later is the graveyard where our best intentions go to die. Wise men understand this. They learn, often the hard way, that procrastinating on what truly matters doesn't give them more time, it quietly steals it. Every time we say, "I'll call tomorrow," "I'll apologize next week," "I'll start when things settle down," we are gambling with something we don't control: time. I once knew a man named Thomas. By all accounts, he was successful, a thriving business, a loving family, the respect of his peers. But he was always busy, too busy. He often told himself he would spend more time with his aging father later, when work was less demanding. He postponed the fishing trip they had planned. He delayed the phone calls, the casual visits, the simple conversations, and then, one day, later ran out. His father passed away unexpectedly. Thomas was left with a phone full of unsent drafts and a heart full of unspoken words. Years later, he shared this with me, not seeking sympathy, but to offer warning. We think we have time, until we don't. The Stoics were painfully honest about this reality. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily of his own mortality, not to be dark, but to sharpen his sense of urgency. He wrote, "You could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do, say, and think." This isn't just a philosophical idea. It's a practice, a mindset, one that wise men embrace. Because they know, the clock isn't in our hands. Time doesn't wait for us to feel ready. It doesn't care about our plans or good intentions. What we delay today, we may never have the chance to do tomorrow. That's why wise men act now. They make the phone call they've been putting off. They take the first uncomfortable step toward healing a broken relationship. They begin the project that's been gathering dust and doubt in the back of their minds. Not because it's easy, but because they understand. Waiting for the perfect moment is a dangerous game, and one we almost never win. I've experienced this in my own life. There were conversations I avoided because I didn't want discomfort. Letters I didn't write because I thought there'd be time. But when I stopped waiting and finally took action, something powerful happened. The weight lifted, clarity replaced regret, and I realized something simple yet profound. It's not our intentions, it's our actions, that build a life worth remembering. The Stoics urge us, live now, fully and urgently. Later is just a soothing illusion until it's too late. The man who chooses to act today, who refuses to leave the important things undone, lives without regret. And that is true wisdom. Because opportunity doesn't knock twice. It fades away quietly, while we're still waiting for a better time. In the last part, we reflected on a simple yet sobering truth. Opportunity doesn't knock twice. If you keep waiting for the perfect moment, chances are, you'll be waiting forever. And now, we arrive at one final barrier. A phrase that sounds harmless on the surface but silently slams the door shut on growth. That's just how I am. This phrase feels so definite, like a full stop at the end of a sentence. But in reality, it often signals quiet surrender, a decision to stop growing, stop evolving. Wise men avoid this mindset because they understand something most people ignore. We are not fixed creatures, trapped in old habits or past identities. Who we are is shaped by the choices we make, repeatedly. Day after day, the moment a man declares himself incapable of change, he's not stating a truth. He's refusing to take responsibility for his own life. I've seen this happen too many times. A man frequently loses his temper, and when confronted, he shrugs. That's just how I am. Another man avoids meaningful relationships because vulnerability feels uncomfortable. And he tells himself, that's just who I've always been, but these aren't facts. They're excuses that let fear and inertia wear the mask of self-awareness. Beneath those words lies resistance to discomfort, to the effort change demands, and to the truth that no man is ever finished becoming who he's meant to be. The Stoics didn't tiptoe around this. They believed we are not prisoners of our temperament, our past, or our impulses. Epictetus once said, "It's not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them." Likewise, it's not our nature that holds us back, it's the stories we repeat to ourselves about who we are. Change is never easy. It calls for self-reflection and a willingness to let go of what feels familiar, even if that familiarity has become a source of pain. But the Stoics believed that self-mastery is life's highest calling, not because it's easy, but because it's necessary if we want to live a life of meaning. Growth demands honesty. It forces us to ask tough questions. Am I acting this way because it's truly who I am? Or because it's easier than doing the work to change? The intelligent man chooses the harder path. He knows that wisdom isn't a trophy to display. It's a practice, a daily commitment to becoming a better version of yourself. Not because you hate who you are now, but because you respect yourself too much to stay the same. In the end, that's just how I am is a way of closing the door on possibility. But the Stoics remind us, life is change, nature is change. To resist it is to deny the very essence of being alive. The man who understands this doesn't fear change, he welcomes it. He sees himself as a work in progress, unfinished, but willing. And within that willingness lies real wisdom. If you've ever caught yourself saying one of these 7 things, trust me, you're not alone. I've been there too, more times than I care to admit. But here's the good news. Wise men aren't the ones who never make mistakes. They're the ones who recognize their mistakes and choose to do better. And that's exactly what we're doing here, becoming better, one thoughtful choice at a time. So, which part spoke to you the most? Maybe it's time to finally let go of, that's just how I am. Or retire, I'll do it later, before later turns into never, whatever it is. This is your invitation to take the next step. Because wisdom isn't about being perfect. It's about staying curious, staying humble, and always moving forward. If today's message stirred something in you, share this video with someone walking the same path. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. I'll see you in the next video.